Welcome to the Self-Preservation 3 panel. This is the art of growth where we use the Enneagram and the best tools we can find to help you transform. We are in our season on subtypes, and a subtype is your dominant instinct, self-preservational, sexual, or social, combined with your Enneagram type, your number. This week we are talking to type 3s and how they relate to their instinctual sequence. This is how we've been talking about it. We have a relationship to these instincts, and so we're talking to these panelists about how they relate to their dominant instinct, their neutral instinct, and their repressed or neglected instinct. If you don't know your instinctual sequence, you can take our free instincts test on our website, www.theartofgrowth.org. You can also take our Enneagram test there and find out about all of our work, from individual coaching, group coachings, and working with organizations, since there is a growing awareness in companies of the return on investing in the emotional intelligence of their team so that they function better together and function better with those the company is there to serve. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we love connecting with you. And for now, let's jump in with our panel of self-preservational type 3s.
All right, well, welcome everybody to the Self-Preservation 3 podcast. I am so thrilled to be here with each of you. And we are doing a season through all the instincts. And the main reason is because it is a huge difference to talk to one subtype than to talk to another. There are a lot of similarities, of course, inside the same type, but when it comes to the expression of it, it shows up differently based on that instinct. And so we hope to get into that today in the way that you answer some of these questions. And so I'm so looking forward to that. Would you begin by just introducing yourself? Tell us where you're from, and then we'll dive in together.
So my name is Michelle, and I am in Alabama.
Wesley in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
I'm Serena, and I'm in New Hampshire.
I'm Mike, and I'm in Oregon.
Very cool. We want to describe very briefly the type 3 by beginning with this question. How does your need as a 3 to succeed and achieve show up through the self-preservation instinct? And what we'll do is look at the particular subcategories underneath that. So the first one is in the realm of health and wellness. How does that show up through health and wellness?
I think for me, I'm like a finely tuned machine. I have to have the right amount of sleep. I have to have the right foods, to be my best self, which probably makes me not very flexible, but I feel like I've worked at it enough to know when I'm kind of optimal. So I heard you say in an earlier podcast, that self-preservation 3s start to get panicky if it's 9:00 and we're not headed home to go to bed. That's me all over the place. Yeah.
I guess the health stuff for me is not super critical. If I have a pain or an ache or something that really seems serious, I'll get a doctor's appointment. I take some supplements, I guess. That's about it, I guess.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with you too, Michael, a little bit. Like, out of all of the self-preservation instinct category descriptions, this was the one I was least resonated with me, because I'm not that health conscious or really sensitive to my energy or sleep needs and all of that. But I do really relate to that creating balance element of your health and well-being, because there's so many dimensions to balance, but just balance in life in general, and kind of through balance having priorities, and that helps me kind of just categorize life and energy flow, with my family, with work, with play, and just kind of trying to have balance in all things so that I feel most well and whole.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Joel, I'll have to say where the health stuff shows up for me a lot when I think about it is other people. If I have friends or, close people in my life that seem like they're sick and they're not doing anything about it, that's when I kind of get activated, I think. And so it sort of shows up when I see other people doing dumb shit to themselves,
Yeah.
So
the self-preservational well-being aspect gets externalized more than internalized for you?
I think it does. I'm kind of an outward three at this point in my life. So I don't want to see people suffering.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I'm glad you said that, because this is the other side to that dimension, that gift. All right. It's first of all a gift for the self, but self-preservation is a gift for the world as well. And you can create an environment where people are taken care of. And that's fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing that. Wes, what about you?
Yeah, I think what Serena was talking about kind of resonated with me, because I don't find kind of the physical kind of well-being in general being what resonates most kind of with me in the self-preservation instinct. But this idea of balance, right, as far as in the different areas of life, it kind of reminds me of, for threes and definitely for myself, thinking about my life in terms of roles, right? The different roles I play in each dimension, making sure that I'm succeeding or doing well in those. And I think out of all the different categories with self-preservation, the physical well-being is one that's less prominent for me, but it likely kind of looks like, being able to get rest and things like that. But again, this feels like one facet of many others that I'm kind of tuning into.
Mm-hmm. And this is true, by the way, for a lot of different types, is that your dominant instinct doesn't mean that you possess the entire thing. In fact, what we're really working towards at the Art of Growth is talking about your relationship in general to all of the aspects of all of the instincts, because the idea is sometimes we overdo one instinct, sometimes we underdo it. And that's more of the interesting part, because we can grow through that and find where we're kind of harming ourselves or the world around us and how we can improve. So I appreciate the honesty about that. So let's move to the next one. The next one has to do with resources and management of those resources. So talk to me about how the need to succeed and achieve shows up in that dimension.
I think what comes up for me with this is security, like just feeling kind of secure in this realm. Because I think it feels less important for me to kind of build wealth or things like that. But what it does feel is like make sure I'm securing myself and kind of my family now, and then also for the future. And so, again, I think that's where a lot of this for me kind of comes in.
That nails the self-preservation instinct. It isn't about, necessarily having the biggest house, a boat and whatever else. It really is that sense of, I'm working against my sense of insecurity. I'm trying to have just enough that I feel like, okay, I can breathe now. I can relax into some other areas that maybe I'd like to explore.
I would say with resources, one of my favorite things to talk about with my husband is money, which usually in marriages, money can be a topic, right? But I don't know if he's necessarily a self-preservation instinct as well. He probably is. That's his own journey though, to figure out. But yeah, like I love talking about planning for the future and saving and just using our financial portfolio like wisely and what's the most efficient and effective way. And, we'll do the hard stuff to get to the good stuff. And we're totally fine to like go without for a little while or settle for, maybe not the best option or the most like flashy option that we want, but get kind of like the medium grade. And then, when we feel like we've earned it, I guess, or more where it's more safe feeling, then we'll be like, yeah, like a better use of our resources. We're not overextending. We're not feeling like we've tapped out or something. So
what both of you have said about money resonates with me. Also, the most important part of this to me, though, is having routines and structures. And it is a security thing. I don't want to risk that I will forget to do something or won't spend enough time on it and realize that it's too late. So I have a lot of routines starting from literally when I wake up that just help me feel better, more relaxed, more present going through the day. And they're everything from keeping the house picked up and organized and those sorts of things to things that I have to do at work to make sure nothing falls through the cracks. And there's daily, weekly, monthly. I mean, you name it. I can tell you what I'm going to be doing 6 months from now. Literally, that's some sort of a routine. It just makes me feel so much more relaxed. And if I get pulled away from that, I have a lot of anxiety, I guess, or I think about that a lot because then what's falling through the cracks. The downside, of course, being that I'm not always as probably present as I should be, because when you make everything into a checklist, it's not as organic or, I don't know, but.
Is that part of the need for wellness as well as having,
Absolutely.
when you have the routines, it creates a sense of wellness for you?
Yeah, because I think that if left to my own resources, I probably would push too hard in some areas. And so that just keep the balance that we were talking about earlier, that really keeps me kind of constantly checking whether I'm in balance. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I can speak to predictable routines and kind of structures. I know with COVID, that was one of the biggest things initially that kind of hit once everything began shutting down. All of the predictable kind of routines and structures I held, especially obviously kind of outside of the house, begin to fall to the wayside. And I found myself kind of being like, whoa, like just kind of panicking in a sense, like where can I find some of these structures and these routines to make me feel more kind of grounded and secure in some sense. And yeah, it took me a while to kind of find some new rhythms in those senses. But yeah, I definitely felt that kind of aspect of my self-preservation instinct get triggered when, everything with COVID started.
Yeah, I'd have to say, I tend to outsource a lot of that stuff. The financial stuff, we found a good financial advisor that we really trust. Trust is a big deal. So I just don't worry about the financial part of it. The food and things like that. Food is an important thing in our lives, but I guess I'm just not, I'm not driven by, I hear a lot of anxiety. I'm not driven that much by anxiety, and I really feel like the self-preservation instinct for me has always been the simplest way to relieve anxiety. It was the go-to dude. I'm going to the self-pres stuff. And now that I've kind of done a lot of work on myself over the years, I'm not suffering from that as much. Although the self-pres is still my primary instinct, there is no doubt about that. I don't know if that answers your question or not for that.
No, it's we're not looking for you to be at any of you at a particular level of development. We're saying welcome to wherever you are. For some, it'll be early on. Mike, you've been at this for a long time and you've grown so much and you've got incredible stories that have, I've heard some of your stories and they've moved me. And so that's fantastic. We need people like you in this world who are exemplifying a way to integrate some of these other instincts into you. But to your point, it was so good. I saw some head nodding around like, I want trust is important to me in terms of, relationships with people who are handling things that matter to me. That's a feature that shows up quite a bit in the self-preservation instinct. Do I trust the people around me? I mean, you'll hear this even from sevens and other types who may appear very trusting, but when it comes to the self-preservation instinct, it awakens this sort of like, whoa, let's make sure. Let's make sure that this is actually safe. And so it's a really, really good point you made there. And that having that sort of settled is like, that's the solving of the anxiety so that we can move on to it. So you said that as well. It's a really good point as well.
Yeah, I'll just toss in that my financial advisor is the Self-Pres 8. That's a good friend. And I've done work with, her in her process. And so hopefully, I don't know, I'm always attracted to 8s. And so I suppose the other 3s may feel that way too. So when you get an 8 that you really can feel good about, there's a lot of trust there.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. Love my 8s in my life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's talk about this next feature of the 3. I really am excited about this question because I think it's going to be answered differently through you and your instinct as the self-preservation instinct, and maybe helpful for a lot of folks out there. This is also where a lot of 3s are mistyped and find themselves having been typed as a different number, is based on this question right here. And that has to do with admiration and adoration. The sort of like feedback that you're being successful and the looking for that feedback and, needing that feedback on a regular basis, that you're successful, you're being seen that way, you're admired, you're adored, you're approved. So talk to me about how that has played out for you as a self-preservation 3.
I think that's why we're considered countertypes, because we get our love from ourselves. At least I do. I shouldn't talk for everybody. I can do things for myself that give me my feeling of value and love, that, that sort of is the core wound sort of thing for the three. And because I don't really need to get that from anybody else, I don't look like the stereotypical three, because that's, when Naranjo did all that stuff, he was looking at people who were, social and maybe even sexual. So it's just an interesting thing when you think about the fact that the types can look so different. I mean, well, look at a social seven, Joel. I know some social sevens. And so they have a real responsibility for not taking advantage of things. Anyway, that's it for me.
You're like so far ahead on the journey. I'm like, oh my gosh, everything you're saying, I'm like, listen well. Because it's like, and I'm like so at a different level, like, because the admiration and adoration stuff, it just is like, oh man, it's like really revealing, like, because it just opens up, whoa, how much am I constantly like self-reflective, like just trying to like, or just having that radar out of like, what role do people want me to be so that I can be valued most here, and in that though, there is this real push for authenticity and integrity that I have. Like, I think that is so important to me. And I think that's what's maybe a slightly off, like the different flavor of like the self-pres three versus the other three, because like those can be more blatantly competitive or like showy. Whereas like self-pres, what I've found is like, I want to be good, right? And so sometimes I guess we can be mistyped as ones often, right? Or something, because there's this high level for authenticity and integrity in being the example of like what is the best, what is tops, And so that push to just find the value, like what makes me valuable. Going back to being a kid, I just learning like, reading other people, reading my parents' needs and wants, and being like, oh, you value me being quiet. That's how I'll get admiration from you, affection from you. I can be quiet. And it wasn't like, I'm not a quiet kid. It was like, oh, I have a quiet edge to me. So it felt authentic. But then again, it was like, is there room for me to be excitable and loud? And sometimes shoving that down. So now in maturity, trying to be like, wait, what have I shoved down? What is really me? And what is just me looking for admiration and feeling like I can't expose that part of me because I'm scared to not be valued? Because ultimately I feel like that leads to, if someone doesn't value me or see me as admirable, then they won't want me. They won't think I'm useful, and therefore I'll be left alone and not be worthy of their attention and affection and all the hard stuff that us threes have. It's just like,
and I hear a lot of that, the adaptation part of the three, the ability to be what you need to be in a situation. And for all of these features, there's no shame in it, because there's a high side to it, a power to it, a gift to it.
Right.
And, of course, there's also the lower side that also is part of it. And so we make space for that. Grace to all of it. So thank you for talking about that so openly.
I think what that makes me think of is, I feel like I learned fairly early on that if you put too much investment in getting adoration from one person or one group of people, there'll be another group of people that you, by definition, fall short. And so I feel like that's where it kind of became functional to figure like a greater measure of what will be quality, of what will be the best, right? And so I find myself really pushing back against things that are too popular. So if there's a diet that everybody's doing, I guarantee I will never do it, which is, sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot that way. So I think ultimately, though, I'm glad to be in that space, like Michael and Serena, you were both talking about, because I feel like it's a more grounded way to be. I can decide what makes me feel balanced or healthy or accomplished. And then it doesn't matter as much if any individual person maybe doesn't agree, because I feel like I have a really well thought through reason that that's the path that I took.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, for the adoration, that's probably kind of one of the biggest reasons it took me so long to figure out I was a three. I mistyped as a 9 for so long because I felt like, that I don't like that. That's not me. And I really kind of come to realize like that really is kind of to what Mike was saying, right? That it's that counter energy. It's recognizing, there is that desire for that admiration or kind of being perceived well, right? And I recognized that and was like, no, that's not good, right? That's not what I should feel like. And
Gotcha.
so I spent so much time and energy fighting against that. No, that's not me. I'm going to do the opposite of that, right? I'm going to kind of do these things where I don't need that. And so, even verbal praise or affirmation or things like that, they don't resonate kind of with me, I think, as much as maybe for some people. And I think part of it is because there's this part of me internally that says, this shouldn't matter, right? This doesn't matter as much. Like, and so I almost kind of downplay it. Like, don't let this sink in, right? Don't let this kind of matter because this, you shouldn't find your worth or value from this.
Yes.
But it's still there, right? There is this desire for that. And so again, I think when I came to terms with it, it allowed me to kind of recognize, okay, this is there and it's not bad, right? This is just kind of a part of who we are and the ways that we've kind of made our way in the world. And like when I can relax and to recognize that's there and to own that, it allows me to kind of more fully show up as opposed to having to react against that instinct.
Okay.
And so for me, I think that's when I've owned, okay, yes, there is that present. Okay, I don't have to go against that. I can allow it to be and also recognize I can be authentic and grounded in myself as well in the midst of that. And it's so interesting kind of what Serena was saying, because you mentioned value. And I think that's how I've always perceived things for me when it comes to this is like my worth. It comes from what's the value I'm providing to the people around me. And this kind of gets into something that you kind of mentioned, this kind of adapting, shape-shifting, reading people. I think for me, I can kind of read, am I providing value? I'm looking at people. Is it hitting home? Is it clicking for them? That's the hit that makes me feel good about myself, right? So I don't need necessarily as much of the verbal kind of praise or affirmation because I'm seeing the value, right? That it feels like I'm providing for the people around me. Now you take that away and we're getting into this deeper kind of questioning of a sense of self and identity and worth. But for me, it took so long to see that's what this is, right? That's what's going on internally that makes me kind of feel that sense of value. And there is an element of wanting kind of that approval or to see kind of that from other people.
Yeah, Wes, it's interesting for me. I got to a point where I really got my heart, kicked in. And like, I can read Beatrice Chestnut's description of the Self-Pres 3, and it makes me nauseous, literally nauseous, because I am so averse to that whole thing about getting approval from people and needing to get my value from somebody else. Because I think I got to a point where I realized, first of all, it's something you said, if you just stop trying, that's the best thing a 3 can do is to just stop trying. I got to a point where I realized it's sort of like this non-dual thing. I realized that there's a unity in everything. And if there's a unity in everything, then there's the divine in me. And if there's the divine in me, why do I need anybody else's love? I kind of am that already. And boy, did that ever open the door up for me. I mean, the gratitude just came pouring in at that point. And I think that's one reason why I don't run a lot. The Self-Pres stuff doesn't run that much anymore. I just use that as my ruler to measure whether I'm doing something in the other instincts that's a good idea or not. But I do remember you, Wesley, and I was trying to figure out, you were a 9.
Yes. That was the disconnect there. Yeah. Our training, I was a 9. It was after that I kind of recognized this 3 stuff. And let me just tell you, it got exponentially harder as far as like tuning into this stuff and like working with this stuff. Because there's a way for me, the 9 was comfortable, right? There's like, this is it. These are some of the patterns that I'm aware. And when I became a 3, I was like, this is so much heavier and weightier. But I think that's for all of us.
Yeah, you know it in your heart when you find it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, everything you guys have said, I'm just like, oh man, this is my people. Like, you guys are like reading my mind, because Like Wesley, everything you're saying about like denying that need. And Michael, you mentioned Beatrice Chestnut, right? And her description, when I read her quick description of the Self-Pres 3, I was like, dang it. It cut like a knife. And it was like, the one phrase that hit was vanity for not having vanity. And it was like, oh my gosh. Because in my mind, it's like, oh, it's not good to be vain. It's good to be humble. It's good to self-deny. It's good to be otherly. It's good to all of that like stuff that was just my ego. And because I think I'm at this point where I'm like realizing how much I look for value in others. I look for that qualification in others. And by recognizing it is helpful to me to be like, okay, now I see how much I do this. What now? And yeah, like what you said, Wesley, too, is like just resting, just like stop trying and resting in who you are, knowing you are enough and you're not too much or you're not enough or you're not whatever. It's like, no, you are enough. You're not too much and stop trying. Like just be you. So it's so powerful. I like love it.
That's what Helen Palmer used to say. You know, she used to say, there's a few people that care about you. There's a few people that don't care about you. And most people don't even know who you are, you know? And so why are you so worried about it, you know?
Yeah, there's something about the, in some types with a counter type, as it's sometimes called, when the instinct really works against the natural drive of the type, creates this complex egoic system. I mean, it can be so sophisticated. You know, I want to be authentic and I want to be, you know, I don't want to need any of this. And so it adds this sophistication to it that can keep some of those in that counter type stuck for a little while. Like, but you've discovered some of that, and that's wonderful. That's the beginning parts of growth, of course, is the awareness piece. Talk to me about the adaptability piece. So we did touch on that a little bit. The shape-shifting, sometimes the chameleon. I loved how some of what you were saying, Wes, you got us started down that path of how that shows up and looking at people, being able to read them and recognizing like, this is what I need to do. This is how I need to be. And Serena, you said some things about that a little earlier on. So maybe develop that, how that works in line with the instincts as well. And the one that I forgot, the one feature I forgot about the instincts is also nesting or the home. Make sure we talk about that. But so again, health, wellness, resource management, and then the home.
I'm going to answer the first part of that adaptiveness, because I think for me, it kind of piggybacks off of that need for admiration or that desire for admiration. If we're honest with ourselves, or if I'm honest with myself, sorry, talking for myself here, in that there's this like desire to want to be like almost like a guru or like the expert and to be that helpful resource to people. Like, you know, that saying, give a man a fish and you'll feed him for a day, but teach him how to fish and you'll feed for his whole lifetime. And I feel like that really sums up that self-preservation of like, oh, I want to teach people how to fish. I want them to be the best they can be and be that expert on showing them how to be the best they can be. And I'm able to adapt how I teach them, you know. So for one person, they might need to get a lot of fish because they have a lot of people to feed. But then there's another person that might need to get a fish quickly because they have to whatever. Or there might be another one that needs to do it sustainably, you know? And so it's like that categorizing of needs and then adapting my expertise, if you will, or who I am and what's needed in the moment to give aid, to be valuable, to be that guru, to be that expert, you know, because that want to not just be resourceful, but to be a resource myself. So that really plays into that adaptability to me, for me at least, to like, I can kind of shape shift what your needs are to match what I know or how I can help you.
I think that it makes me take a lot of ownership. I'm the same as you. I really want to pass on what I know, or if somebody needs something I don't know, I'll go learn it because I really want to provide that value and support. And I take it pretty hard if it's not successful. And I take that personally. Like, I didn't adapt enough. If you didn't get it, I must not have said it in the way that you needed it here. So, and I'm a therapist, and that ends up working out a lot. If you work hard enough, you can figure out somebody's language. But there is that piece in it that then I get to feel successful too. So I guess that's
but that's also the gift, because there is a power to that where you're capable of doing that, of figuring out what works best for the client. And then there's also at times the loss of the self in doing so that can happen as well. So yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, I find that as well. And I mentioned kind of like the reading people are tuning in. And so that a lot of times I'll find myself, I think more in the past, less so now, again, just subtle shifts, right? To kind of try to, and I've always thought about it, meeting them where they're at, right? So trying to kind of meet them on their level, on where they are, to be able to connect for them. And I'm a therapist as well. And so I think there's a way that can be a very valuable thing. And I think it served me well a lot in being able to kind of meet the people that I'm kind of journeying with wherever they're at and kind of helping them in that process. But I think what's come up for me more in light of kind of a lot of this coming into my awareness is how can I make sure that in, some of these subtle shifts that happen, that I am still being grounded, right, in me, that I'm not kind of shifting in a way that's like other than what I would consider me and being kind of authentic. Because I think just such an important piece. And that I think for myself anyway, when I'm not grounded in that, I could very easily kind of see different ways that maybe that could show up and disconnect me from myself. And I'm actually kind of what I'm thinking too, just translating that like at home, right? I think there's a way that some of this adapting and shape shifting can cause me to like mute myself. And the fact of what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I going on? It's almost kind of, okay, I'm going to mute that in order for me to shift in a way to be able to be for you, what you need in that moment. Especially in personal relationships, doing that to my own detriment, right? When really people are wanting me to show up as me, and me without thinking, without realizing, maybe showing up in a way that is what they maybe want or what they need. And so I think a lot of my own personal work has been, how can I not do that? How can I, in spite of maybe what's coming up internally for me, show up as me, even if maybe you don't like that? Because that's where, again, I think true authenticity and true connection are happening.
Really good.
So good.
So before we move on to the next part, can you talk a little bit about how you show up with this third aspect of the self-preservational instinct, this home and domestic, this nesting, this attention to creating a cozy home to build on as a foundation?
I've always had a real tension around this because my environment, surroundings, my home is so important to me, but so is not spending too much money on it. And so that has been a really difficult push and pull. So I'm in a new office. I moved here. Nobody's been in it yet because I'm all virtual because of COVID. But this office that I'm sitting in is the first time I've ever spent, there's nothing hand-me-down in this office. Like, I bought every single thing new. It matches each other. Somebody said recently, like, gosh, your office is nicer than my house. And I said, yeah, it's nicer than my house because I've never done yet. I mean, I'm on the train. I'm finally getting comfortable with that. But anyway, I guess my point being that tension has always been there because I so want to invest resources into a place that feels comfortable and homey and relaxing for me, for my family, for my friends. But that takes money too. So I'm still working on that.
Well, that's the self-preservation at war with itself. I mean, this is a great illustration of it. It's like comfort and don't want to spend too much money. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Michelle, I'm so the same way.
Yeah.
I've lived in the house that we're in right now for over 9 years now, and it's small and, but like it's taken, like there's still things that I'm only just doing. Like I just redid my girls' bedroom to fit the two of them because the last time I decorated it was when I was pregnant with my first kid, which was 5 years ago, and I just like, some fresh paint and a new rug, but that was my budget. I was like, I'm not going to go over that. And this will have a big impact. Like, how can I get the biggest bang for my buck? Because, we've been here 9 years. I can't redo the whole thing. And so I totally relate to that, like push and pull in design. Like, I remember someone asking like, oh, what's your like design aesthetic? I'm like, I just want it to be cozy. Like, I want people to feel welcome, but I don't know what that is necessarily. But yeah, no, I totally feel that push of wanting it cozy and the pull of resources.
I think I feel some of that, especially kind of the resources side of that. But I think the home and the kind of the nesting for me is more about kind of a retreat, right? A place that feels safe and kind of secure. And I haven't necessarily thought in terms of cozy. And I think I'm less concerned with like the design or the things like that. But having kind of a sense of like sanctuary kind of comes to mind. And I have, especially now that it's getting warmer, at least where we're at, being outside, like we have a deck and there's trees and some birds in the sky. And so like, it's almost like, okay, this is a place where I can kind of go and be, that kind of provides a sense of, groundedness in the midst of life when definitely there's all sorts of chaotic sides to it.
I was just thinking, Joel, probably that's the strongest part of the self-pres for me, I suppose. I started when I was very young building things, and I've built a lot of stuff. I built several houses, and I get like a personal comfort by looking at that stuff and thinking I did that, kind of not so much anymore, I suppose. I mean, it's not like it's gone, but that was a real strong one for me. And I'm not really sure why it's stronger than the others. I'm suspecting it was just better at letting the anxiety off, working with my stuff over the time that I had done that.
This will give an opportunity to talk more about, as we segue into the next two instincts, talk about how integration's happening for you or where you are in the process of using the other two instincts. So let's talk about the neutral one, the one that doesn't create too many problems for you, but is something that maybe is your second in order of how much attention is maybe poured into that domain. So think about that neutral instinct and talk to me which one is it for you and how do you use it?
For me, it's one-on-one. I would say that when I was a teenager, probably until the time I was in my 30s, I was probably I was running a lot of one-on-one. I probably was one-on-one. And I was a very dangerous one-on-one. And I think that's where the self-pres stuff came in. I was doing stuff as a one-on-one, not one-on-one is sexual, the sexual stuff that I realized was dangerous for me. I lose control of stuff when I go there and it's scary to me. And so it's sort of, now it's a much stronger thing. My wife is a 7 and she goes to that 7 stuff, and her secondary is also one-on-one. And so we meet up there, and that's really good. That whole sexual thing is great. I look back on my life. Every woman I've been engaged to or serious with was a sexual 7 until I met my wife. And so it's very interesting how that was such a strong instinct. But the self-preservation part of me, because I had a kind of rough childhood and there was a lot of safety needed there. And when I realized that I was going out of control with that one-on-one stuff, the self-preservation would kick in and say, whoa, this is dangerous. This is dangerous to your life, what you're doing, crazy stuff. And so it would pull me back out of that. And so I kind of backed out of that stuff for years. I backed out of that one-on-one stuff. And it was not necessarily a conscious thing until I think about it back then. As a 3, I didn't really know what the heck was going on most of the time in my head, or anything until I sort of started doing the Enneagram work. But I can look back now and say, wow, that was that instinct pulling me out of that sort of prevented me from, what I was doing. And so I would definitely say that that's really a strong instinct for me still, though. And if I was single again, if something happened to my wife or whatever, that would kick right back in, and I would go right back into that, because that is what would be getting me the stuff that I need to help me deal with, any anxiety and ego stuff that goes on. But I don't need that anymore. So, I found a different life. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
So my neutral instinct is the sexual or one-to-one also. I feel like it sort of sits there and I don't dip my toe in it until I really need to. So I need to be pushed out of my comfort zone if I'm going to move forward. And so I feel like I'm either avoiding it with the risk, the kind of fusion or immersion, or I just completely dive all the way in. And so far, I think it's, in my adult years at least, I think it's worked really well. So I started a completely new career when I was in my late 20s. That felt risky. It was risky. I mean, I can't express how grateful I am that I did that. I just sort of blacked out and woke up and I had done it. I mean, it was so scary that...
Wow.
So I work for myself, now have a private practice, same thing, terrifying. I mean, when you want financial security and you go work for yourself, it was so scary. But I feel like that instinct is kind of there when I need it to make me do the scary things that will push me farther. So I'm, so far so good.
I think my more neutral instinct is the sexual instinct. And yeah, I think when I've noticed me kind of like moving towards it is that whole charisma aspect of like drawing others. But hopefully I probably use this in a really unhealthy way because it's almost like a switch that I can like turn on and off when I'm in certain environments. Cause I like to be excited and be really passionate and inspire others and stuff. And so like, it's almost like the switch that I can just like turn a bit like up to 11, like let's go to 11 on this and really engage people. And so that charisma aspect, like it's almost fun for me to kind of have moments where I'm invited to turn that on more in like a work setting or something. And so I almost find myself seeking out more opportunity to be able to do that because it's fun. and then I also notice that like, I really enjoy having really deep conversation. It's really rewarding to me, like on a mutual level though, like with friends or like my spouse. And like when I can connect with someone on the same level and we go deep, it's like, so afterwards I'm like, oh man, that was so good. Like that's so rewarding. And so like when I'm able to like allow myself to be more vulnerable in those conversations and stuff, I think that's helped to see the reward from that. So
yeah, it's interesting. I have, I think my neutral is the sexual or one-to-one as well. So we all kind of share that. It might be a theme, right? Might be a pattern to explore. And it's interesting for me. I was having a conversation actually with you, Joel, right, about this. And I think for a long time I was kind of split. Am I that kind of one-to-one sexual or am I the self-preservation? And part of that is because I think on that kind of connection, that intensity of that one-on-one interaction exchange or something that I really do love and find like energy from, as well as I can find myself kind of having an intensity towards certain things, right? As far as like this fusion with whether it's ideas or passions or things like that, where I'm just kind of all in at times. So I do resonate with that. But yeah, what we were talking about, Joel, is this idea that some of the ways that this instinct gets kind of played out in my life, a lot of times are in like structured roles that provide a sense of security. So again, I'm a therapist and there's a place in that one-on-one interaction. Like I love that space. And I love that kind of, to your point, Serena, kind of going into the depths in those places. And like, that's something that is energizing for me. And I love being able to do that and I get energy from. But right, it's within the safety and the confines and the security of a certain realm that I find myself when I'm outside of that, like in my own personal life, the desire and the kind of need for that per se is way less. And it's interesting. I have my mother actually. She's a sexual 3. And for her, it doesn't matter the space, right? Whether it's professional, whether it's personal, there's this kind of pull to that kind of connection and that kind of broadcasting of herself. And for me, I feel that way less. At times it's hard for me to kind of step into that outside of kind of certain settings. And so, yeah, that's how I see it play out for me.
It sounds to me like, at least because the three of you share the same neutral instinct, is that the self-pres acts as somewhat of a protector, as the container, and so that for the sexual energy to be, utilized. But I also see a consciousness around the utilization of the sexual energy versus the unconscious sort of behavior of the self-preservation instinct. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I sort of like the sexual thing. I can just bore into people's eyes and like see right through the back of their head when I'm in that mode. And I'll tell you, I think that my self-pres kind of comes in and it's like, you shouldn't be doing this to people. It's sort of like stuff. It's sort of like stuff like that. It's like a lot of that self-pres for me is caring about what happens to other people. And I'm not sure who was talking about it, but they were right on the button. It's like, you just want the best for people. You really want people to have the best that they can have and realize what a gift life is. And if I'm using that one-on-one stuff to satisfy my stuff, because it's not as controlled as the self-pres. The self-pres is controlled, and so I cannot hurt people and satisfy myself. But the sexual part, not so much so. I'm getting what I want, but if I don't watch it, it's like I'm not really caring whether I hurt people or not. And that is so anti to the basic core of what I am. So I get pain and stuff in my heart when I do stuff like that. So it is interesting because I'm kind of hearing that, I think, from other people too.
Yeah. So the third is clear here. I don't have to ask you which one is your. So let's talk about the social instinct. Where has it? How has it been used for you in the sense of what problems has it caused you, and how are you growing, integrating it, growing through that third instinct, the social?
I'd say the problem causing was really obvious for me. I think it kind of shows up mostly in like that, in the aspect with the social instinct of the intelligence of where to put your energy, right? Because it's different than like where to put my energy in a social aspect, not so much my self energy, but it is my self energy. It ends up being in the sense of like overextending myself and my ability and thinking like, all right, the group needs this job done. Like I can get it done. Like I'll just do it. Like, let me just do it because I can do it quicker. I can do it. I'm capable, or I feel like it would impress the room if I did it or something, so that hiccup of like overextending myself, overextending my personal energy to try and get the energy of the room is kind of where like, I think my neglect of the social instinct kind of falters a little bit, or just a blind spot maybe is more a better way to describe it. It's just kind of like a blind spot. I was reflecting on moments where I have tapped into this more social thing is catching myself in those moments where I might be tempted to overextend myself, and in slowing myself down and kind of leaning into, I would almost say more of like my, as a heart type, like leaning into my mind and my body. And like when I'm able to slow down in the moment of like, oh wait, are the people asking this task for me to be done, for me to accomplish it? Let me slow down, because my heart will start racing and being like, oh, wait, I think of solutions. Like, let's do this. And it's like, whoa, let's slow down. What is my body feeling? Why is my heart racing? What do they actually ask? Like, what are they actually asking of me? Are they even asking anything of me? Is there someone else that could do this that I can think of? Learning to, there's been moments since like, in my path of growing with the awareness of this in me has helped me like just take those moments to slow down and lean into like, oh, I'm not necessarily the answer for what's better for this group, and it's okay. And so, yeah. And then just letting whatever the answers be, the solutions be.
Mm-hmm. I love what you just said there with the heart types. Other types who are self-preservational types may say, well, geez, I don't struggle with like going out into the group and thinking I'm going to, lose my energy in the group. For me, it's like really bounded. I'm just, I tend not to even want anything to do with groups, but that's different for heart types. It's different for the heart center that it does not think in boundary terms. It's not a boundary thing like the body is. So the heart will go out and it kind of negotiates its responsibility to other people. Like, what am I supposed to do in this realm? And so now you hear it. Now I hear with that, the instinct going, whoa, 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 you're pushing yourself too far. And that's the intelligence of the instinct, like self-care, So I hear that happening in what you're describing. And you've learned a lot of things, a lot of great techniques, like listen to your head, so rational, like, am I really being asked to do this? And then tune in with your body. So really good practices there.
I mean, I hear you talking about, I think what you're saying, Serena, is the importance of being present. And that is so hard for me in a group. I feel like it's a skill set I still need to develop. I feel like I have a really good sense of group dynamics as far as if somebody's being excluded in even a really subtle way, that matters to me a lot. But my remedy for that is still very individual. So I go to pull that person in. I don't know that I know how to marshal a whole group to do that. And so that being present, it's really hard when I feel like instead of there's one group dynamic, there's a group dynamic between me and each different person in that group, and each of them together. It just is overwhelming. And I need to be more present. Exactly what you're saying. I mean, I think I had not thought of it that way before, of just slowing down and not getting so carried away with it.
I think the social thing for me, for many years, it was my weakest one. When I used to be in social situations, I was very anxious because I didn't know how to manage everybody, I want everybody to like me, And I got to tell you, because I didn't have any patterns really established in my brain very well, that was the key for me to really see my passion and to see my fixations, because they came right up in front of me and there was no automatic junk in my head that just went in and said, oh, you can do this or you can do this. And so it was a really powerful learning tool for me. And I also noticed what's so interesting to me is that when I was very unsuccessful in the social realm, it was like a horrible, horrible thing. I mean, literally, it would bring on thoughts of suicide. It was that bad. It's like you're all alone in this world and nobody gives a crap about you. It was that sort of thing. And yet that's my weak instinct. And you really, for me, logically, it just doesn't seem like, why would I care that much about that? But because it was such a wide opening to all of that bad, all that ego crap that was going on in my head. And I had really no defenses established for that because I didn't use that instinct really that much at all when I was younger. It's really developed for me. And it's such a powerful thing, as a 3, to be in a group and wanting good things for people and to see how the group is just forming and doing all, I run some online groups with people to do stuff. And that is just an incredible experience because everybody works together. And wow, what a powerful thing,
There's a big insight to learn as a 3 is that you don't have to do it all and you don't have to make everything happen for there to be production.
Yeah, I think for me with the social instinct, I see this in a couple different realms. One is just my own kind of participation in kind of the group and groups kind of in general. There being kind of more of this kind of version and not necessarily kind of feeling a need, a perceived need, I should say. And then this idea of wanting to kind of see, holistically, the common good of those around me. And that's definitely something that a lot of times I find with my social instinct, it being focused on. What does it look like for good to be brought to people in general and groups in general? And that's something that it's definitely something that comes up internally for me. But then stepping out into translating that into actually being with people is where, for me, I think it doesn't materialize as much. An example of kind of what that looks like, I've ran a few community groups trying to bring people together and having them connect and kind of share and bond, and related actually to the Enneagram. And it was, just such a an amazing experience to see people kind of connecting with one another and then bonding over just deepening awareness of themselves and seeing one another. And it was like so cool to be able to be a part of that and to witness that. That being said, me stepping into that space was such a difficult thing kind of for me, because instinctually it's just not something that I'm paying much attention to, on top of all of my own type related stuff as well. It's just like, nah, we're just going to sit this out, right? We're just going to pass on this. And so for me, it's a very kind of, to what Serena said, it's a conscious choice. This is important to me. And because that is important to me, even if I don't necessarily feel it, I'm going to step into that. And then out of that, I think a lot of times comes gratification and gratitude for kind of what comes forth. And so it's definitely an intentional thing I have to remind myself to kind of do.
Yeah, there's a benefit that somehow comes, and oftentimes it serves the other instincts as well. And that's one of the wonderful things that we're learning, is that the instincts are meant to live in this symbiotic relationship with each other. And oftentimes we end up pouring a whole lot of attention and energy through one to the neglect of some others. So I just want to say a big, huge thank you to all of you. What a wonderful treat this has been for me, to listen to you, to listen to your thoughts, to listen to your stories, for you to open up and be as honest and open as you've been to each other and to me.
I could not agree with Joel more. This has been just incredible. You've given us so much to think about and to learn in how to connect to people. And what you've given is a gift to other people who are trying to figure out where they are and figuring themselves out in this world. And so you bringing the experience of your journey to everyone else is just an absolute gift. And we are so thankful to all of you. So we will see you again soon. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening and for going on this learning journey with us. Make sure you are subscribed, and if you leave us a review, it really helps the algorithm to help other people find this work. Find the free Instincts test and all of our work at www.theartofgrowth.org. And follow us on Instagram at Art of Growth. But for now, my friends, may you lean into grace and away from shame. May you be aware of the needs you have and be tuned into what your body needs this week, your heart, your mind, how you need to connect in relationship, and how you might need to pull away at times. May there be grace and growth in all of it, my friends.